Howdy there folks, it's Geist, and today I am bringing you what I'd like to call the definitive bow guide in Destiny 2. And I know that sounds pretty ambitious, but I tried to put together as many helpful tips and tricks as I could from all of my time spent playing with bows as I main them. And I hope you guys find this helpful, and we've got a lot to cover, so I won't waste any more time, and I'm just going to jump right in. Now, to kick things off, we're going to kind of start with just some basic stats on the bows and just some general tips on bows to kind of get you started. So initially, when we're looking at the stats of these bows, you want to always aim for 60 in the reload speed stat. This is for precisions and lightweights. And for precisions, you want to aim for 576, which is the lowest you can get it for your draw time. Draw time and reload speed are always the two most important stats on the bows. Most of the others, with one exception, don't really matter. On lightweight bows, it's usually a little easier to get it a bit higher with the reload. You can see here I've got 62 reload, so I won't need any loaders because 60 is the max. And 500 milliseconds is the max for the draw time on lightweights, and you want to definitely always aim for that as well, like I said earlier. Same with precisions. Now, the one exception to this is that accuracy is a bit important for lightweights. Unless you just have God tier aim, you want to try to keep your accuracy as high as possible because this is going to make your bow feel a little bit stickier at longer ranges. Now, on to perks. The absolute most important perk on all bows, lightweights or precision, is Archer's Tempo. If you have a bow that's able to get this, you want to always run this. It's kind of self-explanatory. Landing precision hits is going to cause the bow to shoot faster, and that's always important. Successful warm-up is also another great perk for bows because it makes it so that the bow has a faster draw time after a kill. So when you have these two working together and revved up at the same time, the bow can shoot much faster than it normally could. And both Fell Taradiddle and Under Your Skin can both roll with these perks. Now, with any precision bow, not just Under Your Skin, this applies to any precision bow, the string that you want to always go for is elastic string. This is going to give you the biggest boost to the draw speed. And you want to always pair that with compact arrow shaft if you can. Those two together will increase the reload speed and also increase the draw time. Lower the draw time. And you want to always try to go for that exact combo, as well as a draw time masterwork, which you can't see here because this is a craftable weapon, but it does have a draw time masterwork. With Fell Taradiddle and with any lightweight, it's a little bit different. You want to always go for polymer string and fiberglass arrow shaft, also with a draw time masterwork. These exact combos on precisions and lightweights will allow you to hit the caps for the draw speed without sacrificing too much of the other stats. For the precisions, you will lose a little bit of accuracy, but that doesn't matter quite as much. For mods here, I typically always go with either targeting adjuster or freehand grip. There is a play for Icarus sometimes. That's going to be really build dependent, but say for me, I typically run Stompies a lot, so Icarus does nothing for me. And freehand grip is, I would say, a little bit more PC oriented, because you PC players can hit fires a lot better, so that one you might get a little mileage out of that one. For the most part, everybody else, you can't go wrong with targeting adjuster. And then as far as your armor mods go, of course you want to run one bow targeting on your helmet. You want to run at least one bow loader for most bows, unless of course your bow already has 60 reload speed. And as you see here, Under Your Skin only has 52 reloads, so we want to run at least one bow loader, which is going to give us 10. Two bow loaders nets you 15 reload speed. And then on the chest piece, of course, always run at least one unflinching bow aim. Now, assuming that you're not utilizing a bow swap playstyle, which we'll cover in just a little bit, we want to talk about good weapon pairings. So I've got 4 in mind here, and these to me are the top 4 picks when you're pairing with a bow playstyle where you're maining your bow. And first off is going to be your sidearms, which I recommend any sort of lightweights, Suros rapid fires, or adaptive sidearms. Any kind of glaive. We don't really have different archetypes with these, of course, so just any old glaive will work. Shotguns, you want your lightweights, your aggressives, and your slugs. And then SMGs, which you can pretty much pick any archetype you want there. If you have a favorite SMG, it's probably going to pair very well with a bow. This next tip is a fairly simple one and one that you probably all know, but nonetheless it is the most important aspect of maining a bow, and that is mastering the peak shot. And that's just simply dipping in and out of cover, taking quick shots with the bow so as not to keep yourself out in the open for too long and taking damage. Now, since the bow does have a much slower TTK than most weapons, this is something you'll find yourself utilizing quite a lot in order to stay alive. And this is the style that you're going to go for the most part whenever you are just primarily using the bow. The second style, which we're now going to talk about, is bow swapping. And almost always that's swapping from the bow to the hand cannon. I typically like to use a hand cannon that's got snapshot and rangefinder for my setup. You can craft an Austringer that's got the same roll as my Dire Promise here. And also on your hand cannon, you want to make sure to have on quick access sling, and you want to also have quick access on your bow there. On top of that, you want to have double bow dexterity mods, because they recently nerfed the bow swap when swapping from the bow, so double bow dexterity helps to make up for that. Now, one additional tactic that hunters can utilize is that they can use the Lucky Pants to dramatically speed up their swap to the hand cannon. And you'll see the difference here in just a second when I put the pants on. And that's pretty much it for bow swapping. You want to make sure you always go for headshots on both shots. And while this may not exactly make you a whole lot of friends, we've all done it at some point, so I figured I might as well talk about it. This next trick is something that a lot of seasoned bow players will use, but it's not something I've ever seen people really explain very well. And that's draw canceling. And all you have to do to draw cancel, and you'll see me do it here in just a second, it'll kind of look like the bow is just sort of flickering and staying at full draw. You hold down whatever button it is you use to fire the bow or hold your draw, you let go, you press the reload button, and then you hold your fire button again, and you'll do that in rapid succession. And it takes a little bit of practice, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be able to basically hold it at full draw, and you won't even need anything like Oath Keepers. Our next segment is all about lightweight bows. And to start it off, pure and simple, lightweight bows make you move faster, like any other lightweight weapon. When you land a headshot with a lightweight bow, they deal 137 damage. And on a failed shot, where you've held it for too long and it auto-releases, they deal 134. They deal 86 damage to the body. And on a failed release, they deal 84. So it's always one headshot and one body shot with them. And one neat little trick you can kind of do with them, if you lead with a headshot, you can catch your opponent by surprise and go for a body shot cleanup from the air. And you can do that while peak shotting. And it's a little bit difficult to master at first, but once you get the hang of it, you can really get some easy kills with it. One additional thing that you can do, if you're able to, this might be a little more geared towards the PC players, because it's a little harder to hip fire on console, but either way, if you're able to, whenever you're in close quarters, land a hip fire headshot, you can follow up with a quick melee to quickly finish the opponent off. In my personal opinion, I would say that Fell Taradiddle is probably going to be the best of the lightweight bows, simply because you can craft it. Now, there is something to be said about the Whistler's Whim. You can, of course, get gutshot on this thing. I did an entire video talking about gutshot and how to use it and how it's a very niche bow, and it can definitely be a lot of fun. I recommend checking that out. I'll leave a link in the description. But it's definitely a niche play style, and it does have its drawbacks. It reduces your aim assist cone pretty heavily, and it can really double the whiff factor that lightweights already inherently have, which we'll talk about that in just a second. Another outlier in the lightweight family is going to be the Tyranny of Heaven. Now, Tyranny of Heaven is a really, really cool looking bow, and it's got probably one of the cleanest sights in the game as far as lightweights, or really all bows go. I mean, look at that. There's absolutely no obstruction with that, and it looks great. I enjoy using it, but you can really only use it on the Warlock, unfortunately. And the reason for that is because of the reload stat. The reload stat intrinsically is at 20, and with the right perks, you can get this thing up to about 40, but even then, you're sitting at about 55 reload, which isn't terrible for most other classes. So unless you've got a complete god roll and double loaders, it's a little hard to use on most classes, except for the Warlock, specifically using Ophidians, just because Ophidians help to counteract that drawback of having such a low reload speed. The last thing I want to talk about with lightweights is that whiff factor, and it's something they share with Wishender. Both of them, it's a combination of their projectile travel speed as well as latency that sometimes just causes arrows to whiff. And in general, most precision bows that are compounds are just going to feel stickier. And, you know, as long as your accuracy is decent and using target adjuster, it shouldn't be too big of an issue, but it is a factor to consider. And now on to precision bows, which I don't have as much to say about simply because they kind of speak for themselves as the most consistent type of bow in Destiny. They deal 152 damage to the head, and on a failed release, they deal 143 damage to the head. At perfect draw, they deal 101 to the body, and on a failed release, they deal 95 to the body. And unlike their lightweight cousins, they can do a nice body shot melee cleanup that's super fast. In my personal opinion, I would have to say that Under Your Skin is probably the best precision bow just because it's craftable. Although, if I'm being honest, just about any precision bow is going to work well for you, and you can feel free to use whatever you'd like. And the first class we're going to talk about when maining bows is going to be the Hunters. And Hunters are typically going to be what a lot of people flock to if they're thinking about maining a bow. Hunters are the only class that can innately shoot the bow while jumping. They can draw it, hold it, fire it, whatever, it doesn't matter. The jump is never going to interrupt that, and they can do that intrinsically. The other two classes can do this, but it requires a little bit more setup. Hunters also have access to the Oathkeeper gauntlets, which allow you to hold the charge of your bow indefinitely. Now, a lot of people might call this the kind of the training wheels for the bow, but don't let that shame you into not using them at all. Sure, they are a great learning aid if you want to kind of get the tempo down of the bow and not have to worry about holding it, and they are kind of invalidated if you get good at draw canceling like I taught you earlier. But they're still a great consistency booster, because it's one less thing you have to micromanage in your head. You don't have to draw cancel, you can just hold the arrow forever, and you're always ready to fire. So you're always entering every engagement with that arrow perfectly drawn. Now, Void is one of the subclasses that I would recommend for Hunter, simply because of the abusing the invis. You want to make sure to make use of the Vanishing Step and Trapper's Ambush Fragments. Some great exotics to pair with Void are, of course, Graviton Forfeit, as well as the Omni Oculus chest piece and the Gear Falcon's Hauberk. You could also use the 6 code if you wanted to, just to get the second invis dodge charge. I also like to use Stasis, and Stasis is typically my go-to whenever I'm a hunter, for the reason that you're seeing right here. It's kind of one little trick, and it might not seem that useful, but the ability to jump up and take an aerial shot and immediately shatter dive back down into cover is absolutely amazing, especially in Crucible. And another little trick that you can do is you can use your Glacier Grenade and make little platforms, and just kind of make little icy sniper platforms. And you just get up on top of them and kind of chill out, and it'll catch a lot of people unawares. You'd be surprised how many people just don't ever think to look up, especially in Crucible. If you want to run a Solar Hunter, pretty much any of the knives are going to be good for a nice quick bow cleanup. So what you do is you just shoot them, hit them anywhere with the bow, especially precision bow, and then just pop them with the knife, and it's a pretty instant kill from medium range. If you want to use the weighted throwing knife, I highly recommend you give Athrus's Embrace a shot. Once you get the nuances down with that, it can be a lot of fun, and you can get some cheeky bouncing knife kills around walls. And last but certainly not least, you can embrace your inner Pogo Hunter and just wear the Stompies. And it's supposed to decrease your inner accuracy quite a bit, and it does. It'll always be negative basically no matter what you do, but I've never had too much of a problem with it. And now on to the floaty floofs, the Warlocks, and all jokes aside, Warlocks are undoubtedly the king of aerial combat when it comes to using bows. However, Warlocks cannot intrinsically fire bows when they're in air, unless you specifically use the Heat Rises fragment on your solar subclass. So if you want to be really effective using the bow with the Warlock, unfortunately you are kind of locked into solar, at least in my opinion. But Warlocks do have some of the best aerial combat as far as bows are concerned, if not completely the best, which I think they are. So you want to definitely make use of this if you want to main Warlock and use a bow. As you can see here, as long as you've got heat rises equipped, you can freely fire while in the air, and of course the Warlock offers the most stable experience when firing in the air. Now you can use either of the solar melees for quick mid-range cleanups in the Crucible, but personally I prefer the snap just because it's more fun. You also definitely want to equip Icarus Dash whenever using a bow on the Warlock. Icarus Dash is going to be like the Swiss Army knives of movement for you, because you can use it to jump back into cover, you can use it to close the gap. There's a wide variety, and there's a really high skill ceiling with it, but it's a large payoff. Combo with that, of course, you would, if you don't want to use your Healing Rift, you can always use Phoenix Dive. And that's just good, similar to the Hunter, for getting back into cover. As far as exotic pairings go on the Warlock, if you want to go with a more tanky approach, you can always use the Stag. You'll have the Empowered Rifts, and I recommend pairing the Healing Rift with this. You can throw it up while you're in cover and sit there, and you'll have the increased resilience as well as healing constantly. And this can help to win a few more 1v1s, if not take on multiple people at once, and it's just good in a team fight. If you don't want to do that, I highly recommend using the Ophidian aspect on the Warlock. It gives you increased reload, increased weapon swap speeds, and of course the increased melee distance. It can make, bows with like a bad reload roll like Tyranny of Heaven usable, and the increased melee distance is just wonderful for cleanups in the Crucible if you're using a precision bow especially. You can really get some long range surprise cleanups there. And if you don't want to do any of that, you can always just go with the good old-fashioned transversive steps, because movement is always super important, and it'll definitely help to enhance your peak shots and just make you speedier in general. Alrighty, and last but certainly not least, we have the Titan. Now Titans, you kind of get the short end of the stick just a little bit when using bows. You don't have quite as much in your kit that really synergizes with it, but there are still quite a few useful things. First and foremost, Titans, if you want to be able to fire the bow in air, you will have to wear the Lion Rampants, but unfortunately you'll only be able to hip fire from the air. The moment that you aim down sights, you're going to plummet straight to the ground. But there is something to be said about flying through the air, hip firing arrows, and taking down targets. I think it's a lot of fun. One of the subclasses that I recommend pairing with a Titan is going to be Void. This is typically the one that I will run, and you want to make sure to run the Bastion Fragment, simply because whenever you cast your Tower Barricade, it'll give you a nice overshield, and that combined with your Barricade will make for some nice peak shot fights. And it'll just make you tanky, of course, in general, whenever you're trying to win those 1v1s in Crucible. If, of course, you'd rather go the solar route with your Titan, you can always use the Loreley Splendor Helm. Turtle behind your barricades, sit there healing a lot, and just keep peppering people with arrows. Le Monarch works incredibly well with this, but fair warning, people are not going to like you too much, but it works pretty well, as you've probably seen before. Regardless of whether you decide to run Void or Solar, I highly recommend that you use either the Shield Throw or the Throwing Hammer on Solar, and this is just for the easy mid-range melee cleanups after hitting them with a bow shot. If you really want to embrace the fantasy of feeling like an archer inside your own fortress, you can wear Sighton's Ramparts. This has the shoot-through shield, so whenever you cast your Towering Barricade, you'll be able to sit there and just pepper people through the shield with your arrows, and it won't have quite as much health, but it's quite effective in a PvP situation. Not quite so much in PvE. I think it's in need of a buff there because it kind of feels like it's made of paper, but otherwise it's super great in PvP. And if you don't want to do any of those things and you just want to be a speedy boy like the other classes, just use Dude Marchers. I've said it once and I'll say it again, mobility is very important whenever you're using a bow. And with that, that's going to wrap up my guide here. If I missed anything, please feel free to share in the comments. We want this to be the best bow guide we can. And like I always say, folks, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.